Hello and welcome to another edition of Razorwire. Now, I've recently altered my camera, so the angle might be slightly off. I apologize for that. Still work in progress there. But for today, what I'm going to be doing is working on a spotlight in technology, revisiting that wonderful world where we bring in a vendor, we specifically target a particular type of technology or a sector of technology, and we talk about where it's come from to where it is today to where we suspect it's going to go in the future. Now, today, we're going to be revisiting endpoint security, but specifically endpoint security for the small and medium-sized business. In a world where tooling from security vendors can get quite expensive, we're going to explore something a little bit more affordable. Be you a large organization or be you a smaller organization. So let's wander down this trail together and see what we can find at the end. Okay, and today to talk about the problems that we have with multiple pieces of technology, protecting our environments with multiple dashboards and so on and so forth, is somebody who's really well versed to kind of help us out with, this particular issue that many of us InfoSec people have experienced over many, many, many years. We have Piers Morgan from Coro. Piers, do you want to kind of introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, and great to be with you here today, Jim. So, as you say, I'm the other Piers Morgan. We'll get the elephant out of the room. I am the senior vice president and general manager of Coro Cybersecurity, heading up the European, Middle East, and Africa region for Coro. I've been with Coro all of around 6-7 months, and I'm sure we'll dive into how those 6-7 months have been. But it's been a great time here at Coro. In terms of my history, I've worked in this incestuous industry of ours. Man and boy, I think I had a full head of hair when I first started out. I've oscillated between very large, multi-billion-dollar corporations through to more pure play startup-like cyber players such as Coro.
Fantastic. And yes, I too had hair back in the day. And then I decided to start my own company and it just disappeared. Not overnight, but not far off. Anywho, information security, tools, endpoint security, email security, you name it, any product we have in this particular market, and you will have at least one dashboard, and none of them tie in.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a problem for well over 25 years. Obviously, back then in the early parts of my career, there was a hell of a lot less tools for us to worry about. You had a firewall dashboard, you have, your AV, as it was called back then, dashboard, maybe, your email security in different dashboards or similar dashboards, because back then, mail and web, there was one specific company who was quite early to the market who had kind of both. But needless to say, for many, many years, a lot of us cybersecurity people and information security people have been oscillating between the many different dashboards. I myself have sat there, walked in through the door in the morning and opened up dashboard after dashboard to check the status of what was going on, what things have been detected, and so on and so forth. And it was always been a quite significant challenge. Is that fair?
We still hear it every single day, Jim. And I think the market has been flooded literally with a multitude of different cyber services. And, I think at the last count, there were 3,000 plus cybersecurity vendors or purveyor of their own services in some way, shape or another around the globe. And I think what we're seeing in the market now is those frustrations coming to fruition for a couple of reasons. One, I think if you look at compliance, regulatory requirements, those aren't just being applied to the big financial institutions and banks and public sector entities now. It's coming all the way down to the small to mid-market companies. And we're seeing more and more of what the bad guys are doing on a day-to-day basis. And you just said it yourself. Where are those guys struggling? They've been not necessarily force-fed multitude of different cyber services over the year, whether it be for firewall, endpoint, email, NDR, MDR, XDR, all the acronyms that are out there to use people. But ultimately, yes, while they are needed in terms of what those individual security tools, InfoSec tools do, they have all been managed by individual, and I hate the phrase, panes of glass, dashboards, platforms. Everyone's talking about platformization, the new buzzword. But what we're seeing now is a consolidation of those services. And what we're doing, particularly at Coro, is we're bringing all of those services under one roof, if you like. So ease of use is one thing, but more so how readily available we can make those tools for those specific customers. Now, at Coro, we are built from the ground up, or have been built from the ground up, to service that small to mid market customer. I'm not saying that we don't service very large corporate enterprise customers. I think our largest customer globally, we're managing around 60, 70,000 licenses. But on a day-to-day basis, what we're seeing now is a consolidation from those mid and small market companies. And what they want a company such as Coro to do a lot of the heavy lifting for them. They want companies such as Coro to ensure that they have got the latest and greatest technology protecting both applications, network. We can be very, very flexible, and that flexibility is needed to then allow these companies to scale their security fabric into their organizations. We're also seeing a lot of those types of customers move from either an on-prem or a hybrid network environment going into the full fat cloud, making their bets with Azure, with AWS, with Google, the list goes on. And what are they doing is they're moving a lot of their data, their applications that data sits within, up into the cloud, but that has to be protected, I should say, and collected at the same time. So, yeah, I think our big differentiator, and where we are very much disrupting the marketplace, both from a commercial go-to-market perspective, but also how we implement our services, is we're very, very easy and understanding to do business with. We will look at existing environments. We will look at where maybe the gaps are in our gap analysis before we engage. And also what we're doing, and we could probably talk about this a little bit later on, is our extension to across those volume markets are the channel players. So ultimately the trusted advisors of the customers. And what we're doing is, particularly with managed service providers, is we're becoming an easy part to, or an easy service to become part of their solutions ecosystem. And I think that's, you and I have spoken about this before previously, but I think customers now are looking for solutions, not revolution, but more so for an understanding of what their expectations are in terms of having and operating a secure environment, but also removing some of the silos that are currently sitting there. And when I say silos, I ultimately say gaps in their security fabric, to give them, that 99.9% uptime on applications and services that they're using on a day-to-day basis. Because whilst they want to remain secure, there's a fine balance. Is, if it's north or south traffic, these small to mid-market customers with these multiple dashboards, they've got alerts and alarms going off left, right, and center. They're waking their C-suite up at 3 a.m. We've been breached. And I think it's enriching the data that's being monitored. And again, we can get onto AI, which apparently is going to save the world. But what we're doing is giving them both an insurance and a reinsurance policy for their security environments. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, later on in this podcast, I am going to be eating words that I would would normally have uttered with a discussion like this, because I mean, you're absolutely right. When it comes to small and medium-sized businesses, they don't have the capacity to manage 2 or 3 tools, let alone anything more than that. And let's face it, we're seeing quite a significant change in the market as to way that we ingest security these days. Gone are the days where it was a bit of a wild west. We're getting to a point now where cyber criminals, and it's been like this for a while, are actively targeting pretty much everybody. It doesn't matter if you're small or you're medium or you're large. If they find a foothold, they're going to get in and they're going to screw someone over, or screw you over if it's your business. Let's look at the current situation at the moment with M&S. If you're watching this later on down the line, you'll know probably a little bit more than we do at this moment in time. But M&S have recently reportedly had a breach. It's caused massive problems within their infrastructure, with their endpoint sales, with pretty much every aspect of how they run the business. I think at one point they were even taking cash, And strangely enough, Sainsbury's had a similar kind of thing a few months back when I went there to go and get some shopping with my daughter, to suddenly find that, we're only taking cash. Why are you only taking cash? Things are down. Okay, well, I'm guessing since I'm an InfoSec professional of many, many years, that's code words for somebody screwed up somewhere. But it is very confusing for those small and medium-sized businesses. Previous to today, before I met you guys and saw what you guys were doing, I was very much an advocate of different products for different aspects of security, so you didn't fall afoul of being reliant on that one platform. I can honestly say my mind has actually changed on that now. Not only for small and medium, but even for some more large size. And the reasons being is it's just out of hand. We've already discussed it. I mean, I don't have time to sit there in the morning sipping my coffee, going through 15 different dashboards of alerts and security solutions to see what's going on in my environment, how it's going on, and so on and so forth. I'll have time to look at, obviously, my GRC tool, which is a very different type of tool to the ones that you guys do. But when it comes to the actual technology, it gets more and more complicated. And it's sorely needed now that we need to be able to kind of, I'm really trying not to say the single thingy that everybody says. I can't even say the whole words because it drives me insane. But we do need something that can actually sit and tell us really what's going on a grander scale through one portal. I don't want to look at 15 different portals to figure out what one event is happening.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have pretty much done that. And that's not me advocating, at the end of the day, we're podcasting and doing a spotlight in technology. I have to be reasonable in what I'm saying, but I honestly think that you've probably sorted one of the more significant problems out, definitely for the small and medium-sized business.
Being transparent, look, last 6-7 months, I've lost count of the time where I've sat down in front of IT teams, CISOs, network managers, and gone through all of their security stack and the individual vendors that they're using. And, you can ask, who are you using on your endpoint? Oh, I use CrowdStrike. How much is that costing you a seat, a license per year? Oh, $100, $120, whatever it might be. You go down the list to CASB, EDR, XDR, SASE, email, Wi-Fi. The list goes on. And you can get up to, $1,500 a seat a year. Now, when you're timesing that by a few hundred licenses and users, that's a significant amount of cash. But gets back to what you were saying earlier, Jim, is they're running all of those services through different portals, different dashboards. I don't know if they're coming or going. Goes back to what I said in terms of alarms and alerts going off left, right, and center, false positives. The list goes on. We talk about modules. So our modules, and we currently have 14, soon to be 15. We're just about to launch a security awareness training module. All sits within the Coro platform. We literally have 4 SKUs. We have our Coro Essentials, bundle, which is your email, endpoint, EDR, Wi-Fi, and cloud application protection. Then we move up to Coro Complete, which is all 14 of our cyber modules. And then you can have either two of those bundles managed or unmanaged. So you can have a full managed service. And what we can say to those customers who are paying, circa £1,000 a year for all of those different services, we can say we can manage it in one single platform, very intuitive, very easy to use. We say 3 clicks, you can be anywhere in your security stack, anywhere in your network. It's all monitored in live, real time, supported 24/7. The customers that we sit in front of, they love it. They love it. And we can probably do it again, depending on the solutions and the modules that they want to take in. We can do it up to 1/10 of the cost of what they're currently using today.
Mhm.
So, that's the jaw-dropping moment for us, is when we sit in front of a customer. And then what we'll also do is any of those modules or any of those bundles that we purvey out into the market can be up and running live within 2 minutes. Again, very, very easy to API and get the services in. Very easy to, dare I say it, rip and replace some of our competitors. We say to the majority of those mid-market, smaller type business owners is, look, don't take our word for it. Try it. And it's frightening. And again, I won't mention any names of competitors. Never diss your competition. But we're going into some pretty well-established organizations and deploying our services, and we're finding some significant risk factors in those organizations who've been paying a lot of money for security services, and it's not doing what they've been told it can do for them when it's been sold. Is there a perfect cyber vendor out there? Probably not. But what we're doing is we're trying to both simplify but promote enterprise grade security into who we feel have been the forgotten guys for the last 10 or 15 years. They might have been sold and have paid a lot of money for that high end enterprise grade security, and they're not using half of the tools that are available to them because they don't need them.
The amount of times when I've gone in to do audits for PCI or support for ISO or security reviews or whatever you name it from a consulting point of view, half the time most of the tools aren't even really being used. I've been in situations where I've found solutions that are just basically sat there on the shelf. They're not actually doing anything. And you kind of ask the customer, say, how much are you paying for this? And they kind of tell you. And after you finish kind of crying into your coffee thinking, why are you paying all this money and you're not actually doing it? You suddenly realize that it's probably because the product is way too complicated, which is where things have gone. People say to me, what was tooling like in the early days? And I said, well, it was very basic. And the main challenge was you didn't have any portals. Now we've got lots of portals, but the technology has gotten more and more complex. And you mentioned it before. I mean, cripes, the amount of acronyms in this space nowadays on what you can buy is it's just ridiculous. New ones keep coming out. Marketing people are obviously earning their crust.
They are.
It is frightening. And the other thing, and something you quite rightly pointed out, security tooling these days is not a cheap thing. It's not like back in the day, your antivirus would be a certain amount per head, done. And admittedly, back then, there were only a few issues you had to worry about, and antivirus was one of the more critical ones. It's now endpoint security. It doesn't just do antivirus anymore. It does file integrity monitoring. It does, all kinds of heuristic stuff behind the scenes. It's a very, very different product.
Yeah.
But it's still every bit as complex. And I think, when it comes to small, medium-sized businesses especially, they don't have the money for the big tools. They don't have the time to learn what they are. Half the time, it's not an information security professional anyway looking after them. It's normally an IT person. I'm not saying IT people don't know security before somebody lambasts me in the comments. I'm just saying, InfoSec people have been trained to look at this kind of stuff. IT people are very good at things like endpoint security, but when you start getting into things like endpoint data governance, that kind of stuff, it's a little bit out of their remit. It's not something they relatively connect with. I mean, your tool also does cloud security, doesn't it?
It does, and it's all cloud based. What we say really at Coro, we're ultimately creating a new category. It's really security in a box that's very much all cloud based. And we integrate with all the major cloud providers, and obviously the key applications that sit within those clouds. And what is that? It's really the opposite of what traditional security has been. You just said it yourself, Jim. Multiple costly systems, heavy integration, needing an army of operators, the Starship Enterprise of the dashboards, very ugly, no aesthetics, if I can say that. Compare the old world to the new of what we're trying to define at Coro is, affordable, all in one, 2 minutes to go live, fully automated, minimal operation, minimal management. We can do all that for you. And take a look at the dashboard. Take a demo. Take a look at how we go about our business on a day-to-day basis. And it's very aesthetically pleasing, easy to manage, very, very easy to operate and monitor. What the customer or the user sees is exactly what our analysts in our operation centers see on a day-to-day basis. You've got that flexibility in terms of, we speak to a lot of customers, but I've already got Barracuda for another 6 months on our email, but we want to use your email. That's fine. We can talk about that, run side by side, and then give them that full protection into that single dashboard. So we're quite excited by what the future holds. We feel that we're making a big splash in the market. Coro, we were established back in 2016. The first 4 years was all about R&D and raising money, of course, as every good new cyber service providers do. But since we sort of launched into the North American market back in 2020, 2021, we're growing at 300-400% year on year just in that SMB marketplace. So it tells us the demand is there. But more so, the take-up is there because they get it, they understand it. We're not talking rocket science. We're talking basic, but enterprise-grade security for the volume market. If you look at what Gartner or Forrester or Canalys, all the big global analysts, last year they've all told us that the global cybersecurity market for the SMB, so 1,000 seats or below, was worth nearly $24 billion. They're all saying by 2028, that market's going to be north of $100 billion. I think it's 120 billion they're quoting. So, it just shows you how many companies out there are looking to outsource. They recognize that what they've got internally, they can't manage. And they need, as I say, that trusted advisor, and who's there and in prime position to service that market. Yes, it's vendors such as Coro, but then more so, it's about having those alliances with those trusted advisors, which ultimately are the MSSPs or the MSPs. And I think the whole channel from distribution through to your traditional VARs, GSIs, ISVs, MSPs, MSSPs, the list goes on. They're going through a revolution themselves as well, because all of these services now. Okay, you've still got appliances and switches and routers and hubs, et cetera, but everything's being delivered remotely and managed remotely. So they're having to adjust their own business models, and you've got some very, very traditional in the old channel speak were a traditional value-added reseller. But what are they professing to be now? A managed service provider, because everything's automated. The end user customer likes that.
Well, yeah, especially when you're in a small and medium-sized businesses, because you don't have the skill sets quite often. You don't have access to the skill sets. Larger organizations have the wonderful ability to be able to bring on board specifically trained people in specific areas like InfoSec and so on and so forth. But your smaller business, they can't afford that. And it's I was going to go into a bit of a rant there. You know what, sod it, I'm going to go into a bit of a rant. And it's something that you've mentioned before.
Do it.
I have been for years really bloody annoyed with vendors coming into this market and saying, oh, we've got a security product. What we're going to do is charge the absolute bleeding earth for it. I mean, GRC. Let's go into GRC tools because that's a really good way of me moaning. I see GRC vendors and they come in and they're like, we want the large customers. So, and they're looking for like the £500,000 deals, the £1 million deals. I'm not going to mention any of the GRC tools, but at the end of the day, we're seeing a number of those vendors rapidly increasing their pricing because they know they've got people cornered in their GRC tool. Once you've got the data in there, it's very difficult to export it out to a new tool, so you're kind of stuffed. So we're seeing some of the bigger vendors, dare I say American vendors, raise their prices exponentially, knowing that they've pretty much got that customer cornered.
Yeah.
And I've said to some of these GRC vendors, I said, what about the smaller markets? There's plenty of medium-sized businesses that have PCI requirements, ISO 27001 requirements, especially as you've mentioned, MSPs, and managed service providers. They're being hit badly at the moment with attacks, and it's having a knock-on effect with their clients. So you're starting to see quite a significant amount of those clients saying, well, no, if you want to deal with us, you've got to have at least a minimum level of security. But the cost of that security is pretty high if you're a kind of mid-size, say, IT company looking to, break the mold in delivering good quality, IT services. And some of them are very, very good, whereas you've got the big integrators, and I'm definitely not going to mention their names, who like to get the big plum government contracts and then spend 2 years screwing them up.
Yeah.
I've always said if you don't go to the big integrators, you don't go to the big boys, you go to the slightly smaller boys and girls, you're going to have a much better experience. They're going to work with you a lot better. And I think it's high time that security had a similar kind of thing, because you mentioned before, you've got unmanaged, but then you've got managed. What's the managed side of things? Is that for MSPs, or do you have teams of people?
Yeah, so primarily the managed service is for our MSP community. Again, there's a slight price premium on that to have a full 24/7 managed service. I'm contradicting myself now, Jim, but a lot of the MSPs that we deal with, they prefer just to sell our licenses and they do the shrink wrap managed service themselves. We work quite selectively with those named MSPs across the globe. It's very much about that two-way street and partnership and alliance. They have to be fully certified and qualified to obviously manage our services. So we have quite a robust onboarding program from a channel perspective. But once we're there, I mean, we slot, I'll say the word that I mentioned earlier, that solutions ecosystem. And there are a lot of other services around just Coro, but we are that shrink wrap around, protecting email servers or application management. So many different connotations. If we look at how the security market is evolving, and let's face it, the bad guys, the threat actors, they seem to always be 2 steps ahead of the game. But there are so many different ways to get into corporate networks or enterprise or SMB networks now, whether it's through a smart TV, refrigerator, one of these, as well as the traditional, USB ports on a laptop or through an MDM managed device. It's frightening how easy it is to get into a corporate network that has gaps in their standard security practices.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, let's talk a bit about the market at the moment, because I always like to kind of add discussions around where we think we're going. And let's face it, over the last 2 or 3 years, and we've had this discussion before offline, there is a massive consolidation going on in this market at the moment. We've got some big conglomerates that seem to be sucking up all the different tools from all the different places. I'm not going to mention any names because probably shouldn't do, but you've got firms who are sucking up endpoint security. They're sucking up, all kinds of different solutions, and then kind of bringing them on board with they're not bringing them into one portal. They're not doing any of that kind of thing. They just seem to be, if it's good technology, let's just go and buy it.
Yeah.
Are we going to see this continue to happen? Do you think that we're going to see more and more organizations getting sucked into one? It's a bit like, you remember when virtualization first became a really big thing, cloud?
Yeah.
There was a million one cloud companies, and they all got sucked into various different cloud companies, and then eventually ended up being Azure, Microsoft, and a few others. But what are you seeing in the security market for tools from the vendor side of things at the moment?
I think you're seeing how we open the conversation, Jim. Yes, there is a lot of consolidation going on. I think that we talk about gaps within the end user and the customer. There are a lot of providers out there that are pure play infosec organizations that are looking to develop roadmaps and tools. Sometimes they are going through that, R&D route and different releases and patches, et cetera, et cetera. But then I think, you only have to look at the wonderful world of VCs and PE, private equity. Where are they putting their money? There's so much investment going on into the cyber marketplace at the moment. Why is that happening? Because the cyber market is, in this crazy world that we live in, pretty much insulated. It's needed by everyone, whether you're a consumer. We're doing a lot of work with some of the mobile virtual network operators, the MVNOs at the moment, and we're now getting to the stage where you're going into your mobile phone provider, and rather than getting offered 3 months free Spotify or Apple Music, you're getting 3 months free of cybersecurity. And that's how relevant things are getting. We read about this in the papers and the market press as well, cyber market press as well. That investment, going back to how I opened the conversation, that's there for a reason. It's to allow organizations such as Coro. Look, we've raised nearly 300 million in the last 2 or 3 years. What are we doing with that? We are developing the service that we profess to provide. And look, we may well be either making acquisitions or gaining new technologies rather than going down the more lengthy process of R&D. But what we are making sure is, and then again, mentioning no names, there's a lot of companies out there that will just bolt on. Just literally bolt on acquisitions of cyber services, and it doesn't integrate. It doesn't sit in their platform. It's very unintuitive. It's not that user friendly. It won't sit well within certain environments. So, what we do at Coro is we've made a promise to ourselves and to our customers in that we want to be easy to do business with, but more so we want all of our tools and applications that we place within those environments to be very, very both intuitive, as I keep saying, but more so user friendly, but also scalable. If you're a retailer or a manufacturer or a financial services firm or an insurance provider, the list goes on and on. You've got a responsibility to your board and your shareholders to concentrate on your business. But at the same time, you need to make sure that, the data that is sitting within your organization's environment is secure. And that's what we specialize in. That's what it says on the tin. That's what we deliver day in, day out to our customers, our growing customer base. And we are the first company that we know of. We're saying we are looking after the small to mid-market players, and we can have you protected within minutes.
And as I said in my rant earlier on, nobody for many, many years has given us stuff about those people. And it's been horrendous from a security standpoint and heartbreaking. Sometimes we've had very small organizations. We deal with organizations of all size ourselves. We've got very, very large organizations we deal with. We've got very, very small ones. And it's heartbreaking when the smaller ones come to you, and they say, oh, what can I do? I'm concerned about this, or I've had a breach or whatever. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
This is what you need. This is what you need. And they tot it up and go, gee, I can't afford that.
Yep.
Now they can. And I think that's the reason why you've been so popular, especially over in the States. I know you guys are very popular over here. And
it's early days for us here in Europe, but like I say, we're seeing great take up, particularly through the channels. And we've got a raft of collateral information, but more so, the easiest thing for us to say to customers: look, don't take our word for it. We don't want to sell to you, but try a proof of concept. Spin up a few licenses inside your environment. We can make some recommendations to you, and look, you're under no obligation.
Absolutely. And if you are a small, medium-sized business, I do urge you to try them out. I don't normally make those kinds of statements, but we're going into a world of DORA, NIS2. We've got the UK government turning around and saying how much they're going to start charging daily, or 10% of your turnover for breaches. And let's face it, no small business or medium-sized business or even large businesses, are going to be able to pay that kind of thing. It's just unrealistic. But you're going to see a lot of people fall. So if you're going to do something, and you may as well give Coro a try. To be honest, I don't think there's anything else on the market that will facilitate you as completely as I've seen with what they're doing at the moment. I mean, what's for the future? Can you give us any tidbits, any secrets? What are you working on? I mean, we're seeing a significant shift, not only in kind of like the endpoint and email and what have you side of things. We're also seeing quite a significant shift from our perspective, from a consulting perspective, in pen testing to more continuous assessments rather than the snapshot in time assessments. We're seeing more and more GRC tools being needed, but obviously being way out of budget for a lot of small and medium size. Are you looking to kind of facilitate any of those markets? Is there any secret tidbits that you're not going to get beaten up by your directorship or marketing team for releasing?
Stop recording and I'll tell you. No, I mentioned AI earlier. And I think what we're doing at Coro is we're very engaged with AI and associated tooling. We're constantly developing and with our R&D team, making new releases. Coro 3.5 has just been released, and only seems a couple of years ago we were still at sort of 1.4. So it gives you an idea of how quickly the market is moving. In terms of AI, it's allowing companies such as Coro to just automate things in the background without the customer realizing, but more so not unduly worrying the customer. So when we're both enriching the data that we're monitoring, that's all pretty taken care of in real time, in milliseconds. That allows us to do some gap analysis, if you like, in the early days of onboarding a customer. Then we can obviously make some recommendations. But the beauty of when we make recommendations compared to a lot of other providers out there is they have all of the modules that can fill those gaps inside Coro. Coro Complete, as we call it, ready to go, and it's not going to cost the customer any more money. Whereas there's a lot of companies out there, and I know this from first-hand experience, that will go in and provide endpoint protection, and then a few weeks later they will be upselling immediately and literally doubling or tripling the price. And I'm afraid these small and mid-market customers, it's been quite aggressive in terms of telling the customers, right, we are the experts in our field. You need to have this on your network. You need to have this security tool. You need our professional services arm. You need a project manager to come in that's going to cost you $1,500 a day for the first 3 weeks of onboarding. It's frightening. And if you look at a lot of startup organizations, we've got stats that say, high percentages of them are going out of business because of cyber risk, because of cyber attacks in the first few months. Rather than us dictate to customers, we want to sit there, listen, observe. And then, like I say, it's a no-brainer to me. Of course, it would be sitting with my Coro t-shirt on here, but it's about compiling what the challenges and headaches are, looking at the current environment, look at what's already been invested in terms of sweating of assets. And then more importantly, look, how can we shrink wrap, make sure you're secure and scale with your own business? We've got some big plans ahead in terms of our own roadmap and launching some more complementary services. But again, they will be modular in stature. They will sit inside our platform. And we just want to give the customer one price per user, can have up to 5 devices per user connected on one license. The key for us and our success is that listening mode, but then more so being flexible for the end user.
Well, there we go. And I think, if you are a small, medium-sized business out there, please feel free to get in touch with Coro at www.coro.net, or you can get in touch with Razorthorn. We'll be more than happy to refer you over. At the end of the day, I think gone is the time when you can just rely on dare I say it, Windows Defender. I know I'm going to get shot from some of the Windows Defender people on this one. But go for an InfoSec company who's kind of specializing in InfoSec. Don't just rely on the operating system people to provide you with some good support. And I'm sure I'll get a few spicy comments for that one. But Piers, our time has come to an end. It is the top of the hour. So thank you ever so much for coming on to the podcast. I think it's been very valuable. Is there anything else you want to let the guys know out there in the big wide world, or have we already kind of covered most of it?
As always, Jim, enjoy our interactive conversations on and views on the world as a whole in cybersecurity. But look, great speaking to you. As I said earlier, any of your listeners or viewers, please do get in touch with us at Coro and give us a try. No obligation.
Fantastic. Right. To all of you out there, thank you ever so much for listening to this podcast. Please consider liking and subscribing. It's really good for the algorithm. We got over, last I checked at the recording of this, over 13,000 subscribers. Many of you are across Europe. So thank you ever so much for watching. If you do have any comments, you do want us to cover anything, then please get in touch with us. There's plenty of ways to get in touch with us. I get loads of DMs over LinkedIn and through, this platform. So just get in touch with us and we're more than happy to assist. And we're more than happy to cover any topics or bring on back any guests that you may want us to expand on what we talk about with. So thank you ever so much. And we'll be seeing you again soon. In addition, I do have a book recently come out, the Cyber Sentinels Handbook, a primer for information security professionals. Now, this book is very much geared up towards professionals at all levels of their career, be they starters, be they newcomers, be they people who've been in it for a little while and maybe looking for a little bit more direction, albeit the older ones looking to maybe reground themselves in some of the more important aspects of the trade that maybe they've forgotten over time. I've had lots of good feedback from a lot of different readers of a lot of different levels, so please feel free to get yourselves a copy. We've got the e-copy, we've also got the paperback copy, and if you don't want to spend any money, you can go on Kindle Unlimited and read the book for free there as well. So thank you ever so much again. Look after yourselves, and we'll be seeing you again soon.